Meetings, declare the meeting open at 4:30 p.m. and just if you could all stand please for karakia. Kick off. Screen. Second.
Whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki te pai, e hia ke ana te ātatura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, ti hei Māori ora.
Right, thank you everyone. First item, any apologies today? Bridget, yep, we've got an apology from Bridget Williams and Linda Chen. Thank you. Mover for that, please. Move. Sam and David to second. All in favour? All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Right, number 2, declarations of interest. No one has declared any declarations of interest so far, but if anything comes up during the meeting, please just let us know and sit back from the table. That'll be much appreciated. Number 3, confirmation of the previous minutes. We've got a mover there. David, and a seconder. Suresh. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Number 4, public forums. So we've got 2 public forums today, and the first one is from the Riccarton House and Bush Trust, which is Bob Shearing and Shona Willis. If you would like to come up to the table, please. And we have got 10 minutes, 5 minutes, sorry, 5, including time for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, and some of you know and recognise Suresh, who's on the board. I'm Bob Shearing and I chair the Riccarton Bush Trust, and Willis is our manager. We've come to talk to you about our wee project, but just do want to say, remind you, I'm sure I don't need to remind you, but we believe Riccarton Bush and House is a very special place, steeped in some history, Christchurch history, and we continue looking for ideas to upgrade and keep it relevant, and that's really what this project's all about. And Shona is going to tell you about the project.
Have you got our overheads? Yes. Cool.
Which one do you want up first?
The list rather than the picture. Yeah, very quick context. In 1914, the Dean's family gifted 7 hectares of land to the people of Canterbury, and the Mayor of Christchurch agreed to basically hold it in place for all of perpetuity. So that's sort of the starting ground. Under the Resource Management Act, it's seen as a site of national significance. So again, that makes the place really important. The Trust has been established since 1914, and there's actually an Act of Parliament that also protects the bush. Back in about 2015, the board did an overall management plan, and a number of those items have been carried out. But one of the things they came across was that the pathways, there's old concrete pathways that went sort of late 60s, early 70s, they're all become uneven and rough. The gravel paths get puddled and flooded, and our boardwalk, which went in the early 90s, has become rotten. It's also very narrow, so it's hard to have pushchairs and wheelchairs and walkers. So thanks to your board and also Riccarton Wigram, the board got some money to carry out a cultural design strategy, because the board for so long had been acknowledging the colonial past of the house and the grounds, but pretty much neglected the cultural side. And the Dean's family actually had a lease with Ngāi Taurere back in 1846, that actually gave them rights to lease the land. So it was almost unheard of, really, that sort of relationship. And William Dean's actually learnt te reo, so the relationship was really strong. So Matapopuri, who were sort of the commercial arm of Ngāi Taurere, they developed a cultural design strategy for us. And everything in that strategy is interwoven with our overall plan. So basically, we're looking at the Riccarton Bush Enhancement Project. We get about 70,000 people through a year. And of that, there's probably about 4,000 to 5,000 are school children from throughout Christchurch and as far as south as Southland, actually. We work in partnership with the museum and have education outside the classroom, and we also run our own tours through the bush and the house as well. So part of the project is to create spaces that will actually support and enable education. So we're looking at, I'll show you on the picture next, but we'll show actual learning hubs where people can gather and be part of the tour. It's looking at really sharing the cultural history, and that's by artworks, installations, and the Waimāero, our entranceway, which I'll explain again in the next slide. Number 3 is improved accessibility. It's surrounded by a predator-proof fence, and there's 2 gates to open. It's really hard if you've got a small child in a pram or if you're in a wheelchair. So we're trying to make that a lot more easy. We're going to make the path wider and make more boardwalk throughout the bush. One of our priorities is around protecting the bush. So part of that is using some really innovative ideas with the boardwalk and using galvanized screws rather than posts and having to dig holes and disrupt the roots. So some really clever stuff going on. What's the next one? 5. And the whole thing is actually about really optimizing the access for all people. I mean, just we often do little, I guess, trial surveys on who comes, and we have groups from very wide areas. We have Women's Refuge, we have City Mission, we have a lot of mental health providers, we have a lot of migrants come in. People say, oh, well, you're in Fendalton, you're rich. Well, that's not quite the way it works. But we have a lot of people coming through on a daily basis, and we've got some really good feedback from a number of providers just saying what a special place it is. So basically, overall, we'll go to the next slide, but the overall project has been priced out at 2.4 million. It's quite a lot of money. But what we're looking at doing is splitting it into 2, and stage 1 will be the infrastructure, and that's around replacing the paths, replacing the boardwalk, putting in a new irrigation system. We've got a water right, we've got a well, but again, the system's really old. And our fire protection is all outside the fence. So if there's a fire in the bush, the firemen are going to get electrocuted or stabbed with the barbed wire fence. So looking at doing all that. So but we need about 1.2 mil to do that. It's probably going to take us about 6 months to do, and we'll close the bush over that time. So what we're looking at, I think I just explained before, the boardwalk will have the special screws. We've got the grove, which is in the middle of the bush, that at the moment has the same entrance and exit. And a lot of people have said that it's quite dangerous, and particularly women on their own have said that they feel really unsafe. And so the idea is that we're going to actually have a through walk through the grove, and that will again be a major area for people gathering. We often have poetry readings, and we've had weddings, and we've had all sorts of things in there. So again, it's a real gathering place. If you want to just lift that up, we'll go down a wee bit. Down. What we're looking at in the entranceway is having a waharawa, and what that will do is almost mirror Dean's Cottage. So Dean's Cottage is very much the Dean's family, the Scottish influence, the oldest residents in Canterbury, and adjacent to that will be the main entranceway to the bush, which will talk about both histories. There's a whole idea that it's not separate histories, it's combined histories. That will be stage 2. And we're currently working with Ngāi Tahu artists on that. And we're just sort of getting some concepts around that. And then just to the left is there's a children's learning area, and that's really for the littlies. We get lots of preschool kids come in, and so that will be an interactive play area with logs to step on and all sorts of sort of play things, really. That's really about it. That's very quick. Any questions or anything?
Any questions? Aaron?
Really dumb question. Does the bush ever get any bigger?
No.
So, and like what? It's one of the surrounding houses sold or would be bought and then turned into bush and added to. You don't do that.
Okay, so what we've got the 7 hectares of bush, which is fully fenced, and around the bush there's a 4-metre buffer zone, which stops any trees from growing and letting cats and possums and that sort of stuff in. At this stage, the board doesn't have any sense of expanding, because it's 14 acres in total, doesn't have any. If a house next door is on the market, we wouldn't be buying it.
Right. And what about where all the non-native trees are towards the front? You wouldn't move the bush, creep it forward over time?
There's no plan to do that. The bush, the Kahakatea bush, 600 years old.
Yeah.
It's very unique as it is. To expand it and expect it to grow, nobody in our lifetime's ever going to see anything. Even Mike was saying earlier today that, you know, while currently it's mostly Kahakatea, but the other species were logged out of the place. They're starting to grow, and over time, another 100 years, the canopy will be quite different to what it is now, because those trees are reaching the end of their life, and so there's a new lot coming on. But yeah, to expand it I don't see there being any real reason to expand it, and certainly the English garden that's associated with the house sort of separates the two.
Right.
And the majority of those trees are heritage listed trees anyway. But what we are thinking about, we haven't talked to the board about yet,
There it goes.
is working with Ngāi to see if we can actually put in like a mahinga kai area, because it was really used for food back in the days. So looking around the area, sort of down the Ngāhere Street end, even coming out sort of 5 or 10 metres there, and having an area that you could actually use as an education purpose. That's sort of the only sort of
Our range is very good at his nursery, and to expand that into actual food producing areas.
And then also, we mentioned an irrigation system. But why would a 600-year-old bush that's grown without irrigation for 600 years need irrigation?
Because there was bush and unoccupied land all around, and with houses going in, and with paved areas, and with the wells being kept, and it's
But the single biggest danger is fire, and we need to be able to quickly extinguish anything that happens. It would be a tragedy if we couldn't handle that.
We irrigate right throughout the summer, probably 4 times a week.
Keep it damp all the time.
And we're just starting again because it's just dried out in the last couple of weeks.
All right, one quick one, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Quick one, just I'm not 100% sure. I think it's a hidden gem. I often take my children down to Rickerton Bush and walk through, and it'd be fantastic to have those upgrades for people with prams. Been there, done that. Sometimes it's difficult, a bit slippery. Just wondering, that children's nature learning area, so is that next to the entrance?
No.
So it's inside?
It's actually inside. It's between the two. There's quite a it's about 3 or 4 minutes in.
It is
on the main track.
on the main track. Oh wow, that would be fantastic.
I know.
I mean, it's pretty fantastic.
Hoping to have some sort of shelter in there so it can be used, in inclement weather.
There's a few seats around in there, but that's fantastic.
Yep.
It's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, board.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Next up is Victoria Mitchell. Come and take a seat.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Nice to be here. My name's Victoria Mitchell. I'm a local mother and just here advocating on behalf of my 10-year-old son and his 6 to 8 mates who use Jeffreys Park here after school. They took advantage of a lump of dirt that was dug into the grass area to jump with their mountain bikes, and they had a fantastic time spending at least an hour or more after school. Weekends they were gone, taking a packed lunch, having a wonderful time, and great for a mother knowing that they're not on devices, they're out there having fun, they're really connecting with their mates. And being 10, they can't really go far from home without parents worrying or the rest, but it did sort of come with a bit of unhappy residents because they were in fact damaging the grasses in park, and they were also taking advantage of a walkway which could run into people. So I think the council was contacted, and it's just been flattened and regrassed, and this sort of thing seems to happen on the regular with the kids building whatever impacts. And I had hoped that there might be an opportunity, especially at Jeffreys, where you're doing some work, that there could be perhaps a more permanent mound of dirt, which would be very minimal cost at the back perhaps of the pump station, or just out of the way of general public and dog users, because it's just the park itself is not really of interest anymore to 10-year-old boys. Sort of they've outgrown it and they're too young to sort of head up the adventure park without mum or dad. And after school, that just doesn't work. Yeah, now they're going all the way to Burnside Park where there's some ditches and whatnot. It's a bit far for my liking, but we have allowed them to do so. Yeah, so I guess it was just a consideration of what could you offer for 10-year-old boys in the park.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we don't have the ability to make any decisions now, but what we can do is we can have a chat to staff and see what options, if any, are available for us, and we can get back to you.
Yeah.
That one. Did anyone have any questions on that? No, thank you for coming in.
All right.
We'll have a chat and get
Great.
back to you as well. Right.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Right. Next up, we move on to deputations by appointment. First up, we've got Patrick Butler. So you've got 10 minutes, Patrick, and it's also time for questions. Oh, yeah, and Victoria, you don't have to start. You don't have to start either. You feel free. Yeah.
Very serious.
We don't find.
Hey? We do.
Well, he'll dig the mound. That'll be the issue. What? He'll dig the mound over there.
Have you finished by that?
Can hear Phil starting up to dig him out.
If I could just thank the board for the opportunity of saying a few things and hopefully a few words about what has become a very distressful situation in Avonhead Park with, I know Sam's pretty familiar with it, and Sam, I don't know about some of the others, but Sam has been out to actually have a look, which I think is always a great step to take to fully appreciate the difficulties. And also thank Richard Gibbs and his team for being particularly informative and keeping us up to date as best he can with what is obviously a very complex and difficult situation. And also just a few apologies from several neighbours. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here. They've got personal commitments, but they fully endorse what I say. And I think what we've seen is Richard's proposal to date. I've lived in Avonhead Place since July 1997, apart from a short period of time when I was working overseas. And whether it's particularly relevant or not, there has been progressive work done in that park, particularly and for whatever reason, rightfully or wrongfully. Along the eastern boundary, we used to have very large gum trees, which used to soak up a lot of the excess rainwater that used to fall regularly during the winters back then. They were removed. It's fine, they've gone, there's no issue with that. But the ground, essentially, from my view, was left unremediated. There's humps and hollows. And I think over time, I might be wrong, but I think I'm correct that a asphalt path was laid along the eastern boundary of Hatfield Place. And if one stands on the soccer fields looking eastward to Hatfield Place, once again, I'm not an engineering expert, but Richard can probably answer this. If one stands on the sports fields looking at the properties that are affected on the eastern boundary of Hatfield Place, the path sits a lot lower. So I think it's subject to any expert view. I think it's a logical inference that these reoccurrent excess rainfalls we're having, the water is accumulating on the sports fields, and because of the contour, I guess, topography of the sports field and the general layout, it's unfortunately running into Mr. Hume, who's sitting behind me, his address at number 20 Hatfield Place. And I'm sure some of you, or all of you, and I hope all of you, have seen the photographs of that situation. it's only been through the good luck of God, I suppose, and myself during the winter months, staying up all night effectively when we are well informed we're going to get a heavy rainfall, staying up all night, keeping an eye on where that water is in relation to those affected properties. We had 2 events back in July 2022, and we all know from Richard's report and from our own local knowledge that we had over 300 mils of rain in July 2022, the highest, I think, on record. But we can go to the other extreme. When we look at August 16 this year, we had a localised downpour of 25 mils in the Avonhead Hatfield Park area. And if you look at those photographs, that water rose right up just below Mr. Hume's terracing. A slight degree more of rain and it would have entered his lounge area. As it was, it made its way down the pathway and entered his garage area for the second time in 12 months. And if you also look at the photographs of number 22 Hatfield Place on the 16th, you can see how quickly that water rose. That water rose to that level in 1.5 hours. And that was only 25 mils. So I guess collectively speaking, our concern is that we would like something done. It's stormwater that's coming from the park. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And there's no dispute about probably what has to be done to remedy it. It's the fact that we've waited a year now. As I say, I was up at 4:30 on the last July downpour. We had 4:30 in the morning, having been up all night to wake the residents at number 20 because the water was literally lapping at their back door. And we had to open, Steve was overseas at the time, we had to open his garage door to allow a huge amount of water that had built up in his back garden to flow down his alleyway, through his garage, out on the pavement and down the gutter. But at the same time, we had an equal amount of water running into the rear of number 22. And I think number 26 was getting it as well. And just from memory, I think coming forward to the 16th of August, there was quite a lot of water running down the alleyway, which I think Sam did see something similar back last year. And
you've sent them through this year as well. So yeah.
Yes. So it's very distressing. It's graphic. It needs to be remedied. And I guess collectively, we've all been patient. We've taken our guidance from Richard. It's going to take time. But although we're coming into spring and maybe a long, dry summer, who knows? If we got 24 hours of a decent rainfall, I dare say if nothing was put in place reasonably quickly, there's going to be insurance claims coming in, which are probably going to land at the foot of the council for payment. I've put my insurance company on notice. I don't know about the others, but my insurance company's made it clear that, well, we can cover you on one occasion, but, you know. So I think it's a major problem. It's a distressing problem. And we're patient, and I guess provided we can see something firm happening on the horizon, which I think Richard's got in mind, I think we'd be all very happy. So unless there's any questions, that's my little bit of historical introduction.
Not sort of a question, just a thank you for working constructively with Richard, throughout this time. I mean, I know it's been really challenging, but certainly from our point of view, when we're dealing with local issues, I just respect the fact that you've realised we need to get that long-term solution as well, which does make a difference. So I'm confident we'll get to a good outcome today on it. But just thank you for your patience and tolerance, because I've been around there pretty much every time it's happened. And I was at home actually the day that 25 mils, and that came out of nowhere.
That's right.
But it weirdly didn't affect the whole city.
No, that's right.
Which was bizarre, because I thought we were in for a massive event, and it flooded roads and everything, particularly down Maidstone. So, just more of a thank you for you and the team for the patience, but also the fact to work with us has made it a lot easier.
That's fine. As long as we can work together constructively and get something done.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Cool.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Pat Bonish.
Thank you.
Come up and take a seat.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, we've got 10 minutes and time for
I
questions.
don't think I'll take up too much of the 10 minutes of the allocated, but I'm a resident of Greystoke Lane and only a recent, only having moved in there virtually 12 months ago, but have lived in the area for quite some time, 25 years in Hawthornden Road, so I haven't moved too far, but hadn't realised to the extent of what the gentleman has just spoken about, how it had flooded quite as easily as that. But my main question is, I see that there on the plan that we were sent or get put in our mailbox was a number of trees that were going to be planted. I think the intention is for new trees, and as to what sort of trees they were going to be, but probably at this level, it's probably not quite the exact question. It's probably going to come down to, but it was as an older neighbour had spoken to me over the weekend. He was there when the gum trees were there, and they were obviously removed because they took out views of the park, and were just gum trees are not entirely a very attractive tree. But you know, so it was as to whether the reintroduction of gum trees was going to be one of the new plantings. So that was just really my main concern. But obviously, hearing what the gentleman before me has spoken about, obviously it is quite serious flooding, and I'm a little bit closer to it now than what I was. So I suppose there's a bit of a concern as to what might be, you know, going to happen, and obviously it's been a bit of a long going something that's been in front of you people for a period of some time now, and that hopefully it can be some sort of resolution. Yeah,
we can ask staff when they come up to give the presentation around the what trees we might have and the planting plan there for around the area, and yeah, we can run through some of the other details too. But we should, as Sam kind of mentioned, we should be able to get to a good resolution today on that.
oh, okay.
Suresh?
Just a quick comment. I live not far from Hawthornden Road. I'm on Absolute Drive.
Oh, yes.
And I can assure you that in the most recent event, which was talked about, the 25mm, all the streets were like rivers. So
Right.
not the original event had park problem, but all the streets were equally affected. So we absolutely understand, and we have seen that situation ourselves.
Yes.
Are there any other questions from anybody?
I just, it's not really a question, but I used to live in Greystoke Lane for many years myself, but I'm just around the corner now too, haven't moved far. But I remember when the gum trees came out, I was in a young-ish, and I also remember the path being put on around. I mean, it is the Avonhead Park is a great asset, and we do want to, you know, residents will enjoy it, but equally it's horrific. And I even remember when they started to build, you know, dig the drains. I'm not sure if anyone was around then, but yeah, it's you would have
Created the Hyde Park subdivision.
yeah, that's right. So yeah.
Well, thank you for coming up. You've unless you've anything else to say, you're free to hang around for the rest of the meeting when we get to the decision on Avonhead Park. Otherwise, you're free to leave if you wish.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to number 6 on the agenda, presentation of petitions. There are no petitions.
We could swap the name.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so we'll just do a little reshuffle of the agenda, and we'll bring the Avonhead Park surface water management section up first. If staff are all good to come up and take a seat, and we'll crack on with that one.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. I've been working on this park situation probably for about 7 or 8 months now, and it's turned into quite a complex piece of work. But what I'll do, I'll just refresh. Probably don't need to refresh, but I'll just refresh the situation. So even if I could have the presentation up, please. Okay, we have the next slide. So yeah, just to remind everybody that in the last 13 months since last July, there have been 3 events that I've been aware of which have caused flooding. One involved a very heavy amount of rain, over 300 millimetres, and one involved only 25. And that's order of magnitude difference, and yet we're getting the same outcome, which certainly from a hydrology point of view might be quite astonishing. But that is what it is, and I think it really is just a reflection of the fact that we didn't really dry out last summer, going into autumn and going through this winter that we're just coming out of. So first one, July 2022, I was alerted to that a few months after that, and engaged with really trying to sort it out. And then 2 events this winter over the night of the 22nd, 23rd of July, and then the 16th of August. The 16th of August one was quite interesting, just to because it was only 25 millimetres, but the park itself is 18 hectares. So 25 millimetres over 18 hectares is 2 Olympic-sized swimming pool full of water. So it's a significant volume. It's about 4,500 cubic metres. And if we're going to capture that on site and prevent it from going into the streets and properties, that's quite a bit of engineering that's going to be needed to do that. Just for people to familiarise themselves, Hatfield Place, you can see they're roughly labelled in the middle of the photo. We're talking about that line, that fence line just in the park. You can see the path running parallel with the fence line, and a row of trees there, little dots, which are cherry trees, which replace the gum trees that have been talked about. And you can see all the paths sort of converge, sort of just top of centre, and that's actually the lowest part of the park, which I'll just explain its significance. There are lots of other features in the park that really need to be worked through, in particular the power lines that go through, the above ground lines that make it difficult to do things under. There's also a 66 kilovolt cable that goes, a buried cable that goes through, that again is something we just need to be aware of because that does impact what we can do. So I just got a series of photos, again, just to remind everybody what it looked like, if we could just go to the next slide. And I think that middle one is actually a video that if you click on over it, it should come up with a little arrow there. Yeah, so you can just see this was from last July. I forget this, Patrick, you sent me that. Yeah, it was Jeff. Yeah, sorry, yeah. So you can see it's all collecting along that fence line, discharging down the footpath there. You wouldn't have even been able to walk along the footpath without a pair of fairly high gum boots, I think. So that's what it looked like in the park, and you can see there's there's huge surface shedding capture that the sports fields allow. Okay, go to the next slide, please. And then when it goes through the fence, this is the level of flooding that occurred, particularly around Patrick's house, and obviously not far off coming into the actual buildings. Okay, next slide. So just a couple of other sort of key points about the park. These are mainly taken, all these photos are taken from the 25 millimetre event in August. The top middle is just in front of the clubhouse or the changing rooms. That whole area was flooded too, even though there is actually a new swale in there to collect water. Well, it collected water very well, but it wasn't able to discharge it because there really wasn't anywhere for it to go. It's clear that the park was originally designed to funnel water down the line of the pylons. So if you look in the top right there, you can see, and we're sort of looking on the dogleg in the park going out towards past the cemetery and towards the entrance into the park. That was clearly designed as an overland path, although it didn't function particularly well. The bottom middle photo again shows the diversion of water. But what was happening also on that event, and this is the first time I was aware of it, is that the swale was failing and actually going into the gardens of some of the other properties around the corner, which I wasn't contacted by any of them, not to my knowledge anyway, and but it does show that the speed at which this all occurred. And then if you go into the next slide. Again, what you'll see a few other photos there. The top left is where the swale failed, and it was going into the garden of that property. That's following the line of the pylons. The top middle is a swale that we'd recently put in just by the sandfield, and that absolutely got loaded with water incredibly quickly. So it does show we can catch water very well. We've got to get rid of it. The bottom left is the only outlet, only stormwater outlet on the park, and that is along the line of the pylons, and that was working. The difficulty with that outlet is that we're not allowed really to put any more water into it than it already takes, because I think all the streets downstream of there are at capacity, and that's again one of the challenges. So all these photos were taken over that 16th of August flood event. The bottom middle is Russley Road. I just wanted to make sure nothing was coming off the road into the park, and it certainly wasn't. So this is all park generated, and that's quite important because we can't go to transport and say do something about it. It's a parks issue that we've got to solve. Okay, next slide. I think I showed this at the briefing back in May, but this just shows the contours, and each of those lines represents 100 millimeters of fall. So from the left-hand side, the western side to the eastern side, there's about 2 meters of fall, which is actually quite a lot. If it's higher than the height of most people. Doesn't seem like much when you're on site, but over that distance, it's quite reasonable. And the contours are very evenly spaced, so it's got a very good fall, and that in itself contributes to the problem. And if we look at some of the houses, or the main houses that were affected, which are numbers 20, 22 and 22A, they are all in a low spot. I'd have to point to the photo to show where it is, but they're about, if you're looking on the east side from the bottom right-hand side and come up probably about a fifth of the way, you'll see, well, you can probably see a contour that sort of ends just in front of those houses. But the low spot of the entire park is at the dogleg, where the cluster of trees is there and where it goes around the corner underneath the pylons. So you can work out a lot just from the contours, but it's even better when you've got the contours and you've got the water movement, because the flood engineers who are working on the modelling of this have now got a great case study to work on. It was unfortunate that we had another event on the 16th of August, but the benefit is that we were on site and able to see it and capture it, photograph it, and now the stormwater models have got all that information which they can test their assumptions against. Okay, next slide, please, Ian. So over the last few months, I've been engaging quite a range of people, landscape people, stormwater planners and engineers, both within council and external consultants. If we're going to catch the water on site and get rid of it, we've got to be able to discharge it to ground, and that's the key to do this. So we've had various soakage tests done, which were very positive. We've carried out a lot of water and soil analysis, because the key thing is that if we're discharging water to ground into the buried gravel there, which you can see in that photograph there, we have to be able to prove that it's going to be treated or not contaminated, and that is a process that you can only do by capturing samples when it's very wet, which we've done. There are still a couple of test results I'm waiting to get back. We had one anomaly in one of the results, but by and large, I think we'll be okay. We have to use the council stormwater global consent to be able to do this. And if we can't use that, it means going to ECAN. And if we have to go to ECAN to soak water to the ground, we have no chance of being able to do so. They're just not issuing consents for this sort of activity at the moment. I'm reasonably confident we'll be okay. I've talked to the senior stormwater engineers in the council who are all over this, and they're liaising with external consultants. And I think we will have a successful outcome for a long-term solution. The other group we have to liaise with Orion. They're not always the easiest organisation to deal with, or finding who you deal with, because we need to do some work under the pylons and over the 66 kilovolt line, and I think we've got a resolution there. We have consulted with the sports clubs who will be affected by any work. It won't affect the sports fields. All the work we're planning is on the boundaries of the sports fields and beyond them, and they're more than happy for us to improve any drainage in the park. And then finally, obviously, with the residents, I have a group of the main residents who've been affected by flooding who I've consulted with, and we've done a wider letter drop and online notification. The online notification actually didn't bring in any comments whatsoever over the period, which was interesting. So if we go to the next slide, so the long-term plan, well, we can't see that in too much detail, but it basically, and I talked about this in May, it's been tweaked a little bit since then, is to divide the park into 3 main catchments, have 2 very large planted hollows, which can be fed by a series of swales. And I've met with contractors on site who have helped us actually design this. It's been very, very useful. One of the suggestions they had was the path that is on the eastern side, parallel to Hatfield Place, because that actually acts as a catchment area itself and directs water very quickly to the paths that go off the park, is to raise that path. It needs replacing anyway, and it's only 1.8 meters wide. Make it a bigger path and turn it basically into a raised bund so that it catches the water and feeds it into one of our planted hollows. So that's the plan. The plantings that you see there are really schematic. A decision hasn't been made on the planting plan, but it will need to follow the urban forest plan that's been recently adopted, and species selection is all governed by that. So it won't be gum trees, I'm pretty sure of that. Yeah, or willows. Next slide, please, Aidan. And then the planting has been carried out by landscape architects in terms of the shading that it would be caused or not caused, and it will take into account, obviously, the proximity of neighbouring houses and the proximity of sports fields and sight lines and so on. So that is all the same methodology that was used for the urban forest plan, same outfit who did it. Okay, next slide, please. Now, of course, as a board, you need to know are there any alternative options? Well, there's always an option of doing nothing. I strongly don't advise that, and I don't think you will either, because we've already seen on 2 occasions the risk of flooding is very likely. We're getting our 1 in 100 year events sort of twice a year, it seems. So doing nothing, I don't think is an option. The second option there is actually a short-term solution, and we talked about this on site, putting a bunded swale right in front of the fence line between the fence and the cherry trees, and that actually would be required anyway if we do work on the path, because it would be part of the erosion and sediment control plan. So we're going to have to build it, so we might as well make it into something useful. But the biggest challenge is not just sort of blocking water off on that side of the park and then directing it down under the pylons and flooding the properties just around the corner. And the only way we can do that is to have local soakage holes, which sound as if it's a very easy thing to do, but again, I need to get permission to do that. I don't have the delegation at all to install that, and that would get signed off by our stormwater engineers. And I'm fairly confident it will do that. I'm poised with contractors. Prices are all sorted. I'm ready to press go on the short-term solution probably this month. Just waiting for one soil test result to come back, and then I think we're ready to go. So conclusions. Next slide, please. We have to be able to get soakage to ground. We're not going to be able to get rid of this water off-site. We can probably get some of it off-site, but not to the level that it's been pouring into the streets recently. The temporary swale and bund that we put between the fence line and the cherry trees is part of a long-term solution anyway, so that's good. We don't have to do the long-term solution in one go. We've got basically 2 pieces of work that could be streamlined over a couple of years. Just to put it in perspective, we're talking about 1,400 or 1,500 cubic meters of soakage boulders that would have to be buried in the ground and the equivalent amount of material coming out. So it's a lot of movement of vehicles to deliver that and take other put other material elsewhere. And being such a busy park, it's not something we can just sort of rock up and do. And then, as I mentioned, the long-term solution could be dovetailed into the urban forest plan. And this park in itself, I think, could form an excellent case study for how we deal with that, climate resilience and so on for future parks that may have a similar flooding issue. Although at the moment, I think this is the only one. I hope. Yeah. So final slide. My recommendation then is obviously to put the bunded swale in along the fence line. That's a quick fix, and could happen certainly this side of spring. And plan and implement the longer term solution. The catch for me, of course, is we've got to find the finance to do it. I've had some high level cost estimates. It's not a cheap solution. If we can break it perhaps down into smaller pieces, that might be a better way of doing it. But we have a community parks capital program. We've just got to find this unbudgeted item in a long term plan to be able to do it. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Richard. That's great. Just like to open it up to some.
Look, thank you. That's fantastic. You started off by saying it was the equivalent to almost 3 Olympic-sized pools of water, 2 Olympic-sized water. So the volume, if we had a 25 mil event again,
yes,
do we feel that the predicted soakage pits would actually treat that, or is it? Should we be planning for 30 mil of water, 40 mil of water? What's the capacity of the soakage pits?
What we're doing is the stormwater engineers are designing their modelling and the size of those soakage pits on the July event last year. So we have to give them a number. They're saying, well, I mean, because we could design to 10 millimeters, 20, 30, whatever it is, which one do we choose?
Yeah.
And you have to balance it against the cost.
Yes.
And the path that leads off the property down into Hatfield Place was always an overland flow path.
Yeah.
I think we will still need to use that, but just reduce the volume of water that goes down it so that it doesn't have the risk of entering into the properties. And we still have the swale under the pylons that can be reshaped.
Yeah.
And that's how we would lose some of the spoil that would come out of the ground. We'd reshape that whole bund to divert some more water down into that outlet. I mean, it was always designed to do that. And as long as we can model the amount of water that goes into it, we'll get that.
Sounds like you're well onto it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's 2 foot acres. If you don't like metric units, 2 foot acres is the equivalent volume of 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools over the whole park. Quite a lot.
Thank you, Suresh.
Just thank you, comment for, I think, feeling the pain of the community and actually working with the community, and most importantly, being there when the event gave the opportunity.
Yeah.
Because it's all good to get videos and models and all that, but actually being there is everything. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron?
Yeah, so I've got 3 hopefully quick questions. First one is, how can you not get a consent to discharge the water from the site into the own site? Because that's naturally how water would go, lands on a paddock, goes into the ground.
Yeah, I know. Ask you can.
What's the point even having a consenting system when it's so nonsensical?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think a lot of this hinges off water extraction and water discharge, and it's to do. I'm not on top of the exact reason, but it's to do with the bottled water episode. I don't know much about it, but I mean that's a question I can provide a more
You won't get
objective
notice
answer.
July next year.
No,
Right. Okay.
it's months away. I mean, we can apply for consent, but they're just not processing. That's my understanding.
So
Yeah.
great. And then the other one is so not allowed to take it or put it back. The water, that's good. Then the other one is the Avonhead Stream project that's come up.
Yep.
If that was activated, seems maybe.
Yeah.
And we used it, we pulled water, used it, and then turned it off when there's obviously rain. Would that alleviate the problem if the water was going into the overhead stream?
Well, it's on the wrong side of the park, unfortunately, right. and none of the, because we had a look at that too, none of the surface water was actually falling towards it. So the only way we could get water into that the Isle of the stream, well, we could pipe it, but again, I have had meetings with the ecologists, freshwater ecologists, and I think we probably could eventually get permission to do that, but anytime you talk about taking water off a sports field, there's this presumption, I think incorrectly, that it's contaminated with something.
Sweet and things like that. And then the other one is liniment. And then the other one is this, what's wrong with the soil there that it's not absorbing? Because I did a quick Google of
There's
what
nothing wrong with
it's
it.
meant to do.
It's very fertile. There's nothing wrong with the
It's got
soil.
really high clay content or something.
Well, not particularly. I think
Just down the road, all the paddocks don't look like that.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
but they
that
don't
one
have-
does, and there's a couple that do, like along the edge of Ryan's Road, does it? But there's plenty of bit.
Yeah, I think the 2 or 3 reasons. One is that it's never really dried out over the summer.
Right.
But the other thing is that because we went into the winter, through the autumn and into the winter with a lot of grass growth, the fields needed to be mown constantly. And I think doing that when it gets wet, I think the surface actually became a bit sealed. So we've been opening it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So that's because, you know, it's a very smooth surface.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, thanks, Aaron.
To move it.
Right. Second, David. Right, this is just, for the staff recommendation, just so everyone's aware. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much for your work on that.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciated.
Great.
All right, the next item on the agenda, we'll move back to the proposed bus stop relocation on Clyde Road. If Mansour, you'd like to come up? And if you're here for that one, feel free to leave. You don't have to hang around for the rest.
Cool, thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, board. My name is Mansoor Gowari and I'm serving as passenger transport engineer. And starting with Georgia, you know. So the main reason behind the proposed upgrades here is a request from a resident on Clyde Road, property number 86, saying that the bus stop line marking is conflicting with its driveway. So we have investigated that and it posed 2 main challenges. First is that the vehicles who wants to go through the driveway or exit the driveway will conflict with the passengers who wait at the bus stops. And the next one is that bus passengers who want to get into bus or alighting from the bus, they have to step over a higher height. So this again is challenging the accessibility to bus, in particular for old people, children, and disabled people. And our investigation also showed that the current line marking is not at the standard level. Indeed, we don't have a standard parking restriction at the entrance and exit of the bus marking. So the challenge that it brings is that the bus cannot safely pull into the bus stop, and it cannot stop in a closed stance from the curb and parallel to the curb, again challenging the access from curb to bus. So we have investigated that, and the upgrades that are detailed in the report are proposed, which actually we are relocating this bus stop beside to property number 82 and 84 on Clyde Road. And with these, we have the sufficient hard standing area. It's not conflicting with any driveway anymore. And we also raise the existing line marking to a standard level. And in addition to this, we also provide some bus stop facilities like tactile pavers, which improve the access for blind or low vision people, and a seat, which improves the waiting area for those in the bus stop. So I think that was the reasoning, the upgrades, a summary of that. So I'm happy if there's any question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions from anyone on that one? Yep, Suresh.
So thank you for that. So the seat which is being provided currently, if future demand grows, can it be converted into a bus shelter?
I think so. what we have investigated that it will be possible. We just need some tree treatment, but we have the space. We also had a demand for having a shelter or a seat at the moment because because we had the limitation on funding. So we have a threshold for number of passengers that use on the basis of daily average a bus stop to provide. And these bus stops not meeting that threshold. So at the moment we go with a seat, but in future, I guess in PT Future program that we have, that will be one of the bus stops that will improve the seat to the shelter. Yeah.
Yeah, Aaron?
Is there a net loss of car parks? Kind of looks like there is, but I can't quite tell.
Yeah, it's maybe one. We actually are, but we are really
like 23 or something.
No.
One's okay.
Yeah.
Whole street is free parking anyway.
Yeah, but I just mean that because it's quite high use parking around here, that you don't want to be taking out a dozen car parks. That's all right. That's fine.
Any other questions from anyone on that? You have a mover for that one?
Happy to move.
Cherish. Second to Aaron. All in favour of the staff recommendation?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hang on.
Welcome, Mansoor. See you again.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is summer with your neighbours.
So I'll take the report as read and just hear if you've got any questions.
None from me, happy to move.
Yep, James to move.
Happy to second.
Dave, Suresh got that one, correct for second.
And appreciate the two declines and why, but it's not easy, but.
Yeah.
All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Number 10 on the agenda is the discretionary response fund.
Happy to move.
There's actually two applications, Aaron and Nat. So what's the play centre should be on the title of that report as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
We did take that as read.
yeah, happy to move.
Aaron to move. Second for David. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, guys. We appreciate that.
Good to see more variation here.
Number 11, the YDF. Karen? Anything?
No,
Pretty straightforward,
Alan,
right?
yeah.
Take that as read as well.
I think Aaron
and Dave move and second that one as well. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. The Community Board Area Report, number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to take the report as read and just highlight, which I think Bridget and Jason spoke about at council the other day, that your nomination for the Friends of Crosby Park for the Keep Christchurch Beautiful Award was successful. I think that's the certificate up there, is it, Karen?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
right.
one of the volunteers.
So,
Right.
So it was great, and it was good that some of the different groups involved were able to attend the function as well. So yeah, but I'm happy to take any questions if you've got them, but I think it's fairly straightforward.
Any questions for anyone on that? I'm happy to move that. Someone will second that?
Yeah, I'll second.
Second from James. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Mary Ann, as always, for your efforts. Number 13, elected members information exchange. What's been going on, Suresh?
Quick question for me, not to report. We often used to get people who have been given help to come and make presentations to us at some stage. We haven't had that for a while. Of course, it got broken because of COVID. Because I think that's a very good activity. I think both ways, for them to present to the board and for us to learn from them?
Absolutely. We were just talking about it recently in the office about how it was time to get some of the young people back in front of you. So we'll be doing that.
I wonder if we could even talk offline about what that might look like or something like that, as opposed to doing now. Like we can have a chat about it, but I think we could.
Yep.
But we could maybe even look at doing a different forum or doing a bit of a refresh or something. Yeah, so just to bring
That's
that
a
up.
good idea.
Yep.
Yeah, so keen to talk.
Anyone else got anything they'd like to raise since the last meeting? Sure.
And I was just going to say, I had a meeting, the Brindwood Burnside Community Network meeting, and Karen's done such an amazing job with that, bringing a lot of people together. Things are progressing along quite nicely, all thanks to Karen. A good range of people there from the community, and hopefully a website soon.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks to Karen for everything that she does.
That's great. Oh, if there's nothing else, we'll finish with the karakia and then we'll close the meeting. Everyone please stand.
Unuhia, ki te uru takurui, kia wātea, kia mama, te nanakau, te tinana, te wairua, I te ara takata, koia rā e rongo, akakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, hui e, tai tai.
Thank you, everybody. And with that, we will announce and close 5:31 PM.
Yeah, well done.